We are making, gosh, I look very high today. We are in the height of summer at the moment in the UK, and for once we actually have sunshine and excitement. So what I'm going to be doing is showing you these pods. I won't deny I'm a little bit addicted to them because they're fabulous. And if you were really clever, you could make earrings, but don't. So there we go. These are what we're making today, but we're doing them on a larger scale because I may or may not, you can decide, have decided that that their dougherties online needed to have a little bit of orders from me because I haven't ordered from them for a little while. And they had this on sale, which is the new Lewis and Irene fabric. Now, any of you who've never seen the Lewis and Irene fabric glow in the any of you haven't seen the Lewis and Irene glow in the dark fabric. Now I've left this in the sun, charging for about 5-10 minutes. I'm now going to take you into the laundry room. What could possibly go wrong there? Oh, now if I'd been any good at this, I would have planned this, that I've actually got a place to put you. That looks right. Okay, so closing the door, turning the lights off, and you can see it's not hugely glow in the dark, but you can see they do glow in the dark. And I'm still here, don't worry, you can see them glow in the dark over here. Maybe I didn't leave them in the sun enough, but they do actually, all the little stars and everything glow in the dark. And all of you can now confirm I officially know where the laundry room is. I don't use it, but I know where it is. So there we go. So that's what we're going to be making out of today. The pattern I have, just hit you on the light. I have actually just put the pattern on our website, iQuilt.studio. So if you want to have a little buy of the pattern, thank you. If you don't worry. You can see how to do this. This pattern is so simple. If you have one of those IKEA Kallax bookcases, you can make these pods be exactly the size that you need them to be because you need 5 squares the same size. So I'm doing 14¼ because I thought that would be quite nice for the whole design. But if you're doing the Kallax ones, you only need 13 inches. So I'd cut it at 13¼ and you'd be dead on, or 13 and you'd be slightly under. But you can easily then make your own storage pods with these. I'm using this single-sided interface, single-sided fusible Bosal in our form. There are many other different types of it. You can get the Style Fix by Vlizelina. You can get this one. I managed to get some of this into stock and it is really, really easy to use. So what I thought we would do first of all is when you get your fabric, I've cut mine as a strip of just over 14, it's 14¼ inches. With this fabric, you can fussy cut them. So you can see I almost got my fussy cutting perfect. But I think with my seam allowance, I should have got that absolutely perfect. However, don't do what I did. And you can see I got my snowflakes in the wrong way. So that's a little bit annoying because if you try and line the buildings up now, they're going to be out. Not annoying at all. So if you are going to try and have a continuous wrap all the way around, just make sure that you get your cutting completely square on there. I'm not too bothered. If somebody's going to come and criticize the cutting on my fabric around there, well, I hope they have a lovely day. Now what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to show you start to finish how it is I am doing this process. First things first, please ignore the green swim shorts. It is 36 degrees in my kitchen at the moment. It's very warm. So all I'm doing now is I'm lining my selvages up completely. Okay. And I'm giving this a good press. Now I don't know any single company that puts fabric on the bolt and it comes off completely lined up as you unwind it. So you do this how you choose. But I personally prefer to have this completely lined up. You can see my selvages are identical in the same place. And actually, as I've seen there, my selvages weren't in the exact same place. That was probably why I was out a little bit before. So there we go. Now my selvages are lined up completely. And the reason you're wanting to do that is when you do start cutting these out, it'll be nice if you can get everything lined up. If you have that type of fabric that is continuous and you want to carry it out. So all I'm doing is I'm making sure that the fabric is completely flat getting rid of any creases and crinkles, because you're going to attach this onto an interfacing. And by putting it onto an interfacing, if you have got any lines or dimples like that, I'm not sure if you can see them, they will actually still be present when you put them on the interfacing. And I personally don't like that. You must do what works for you. Okay, so I'm giving that a good old press. Okay, and I've got a nice little workstation over here where I'm now going to rotate you over there. So I've given this a good old press. I've measured this, so it's just over 14.25. I've cut everything else at 14.25. So I'm going to rotate my mat, and I've lined up my edging over here perfectly. All I'm going to do is now line up here 14.25 and just trim off this tiny little bit of excess on the end. You can see it's a slither of it that's left. So that brings me to 14.25 this way. Now what I've done is I've tried not to have the moon in the same place in every block. It doesn't always work out that way. You must do what works best for you. I'm gonna try and have everything in the same place over here. You'll see I've got a little bit of snowflake over there. So I'm just gonna measure. Now your fabric is obviously, it's all to you what works best for you. Your fabric may not have something at the bottom to line up to. I'm just simply going to take 1/2 inch from the top of my little spider webbies, and I'm going to create a space over here. Now this bit of fabric is gorgeous. It's so fun. So if you were making one of the bags in the pattern that I've got, this would make a fabulous little fold for the bag. So don't throw those away. They will be really, really handy if you're continuing to use my compendium. So all I'm doing now is I'm moving this down to my 0 line over here, and it's all lined up over here. I know this is 14.25. So all I'm doing now is taking my ruler, lining this up to 14.25 over here, and cutting them across. Now remember, if you're doing a 6-inch block, you then would be lining everything up to 6 inches. If you're doing a 12-inch block, it'll be to 12 inches. Or if you're doing one of the Calyx ones, those will be 13 inches. So then, if you weren't doing a live feed and very stupidly put all your fabric on top of the stand, you will have cut out your Bosal in our form to the size you want it. As I said, I'm doing 14.25. And on you will feel this side is nice, soft and fluffy and beautiful. This side has got a little bit of a bumpy, almost tacky feel to it. Those are your glue dots. So you want the back of your fabric to go onto where the glue dots are over there. You line everything up to the edge, check that everything is roughly the same size, and it is. And now that's ready to activate and press. So I'm just leaning that over to the ironing board. And over here, again, check you've got the right size. Lay it on top. And we are ready. So now I'm going to go and press those on the board. Beforehand, what I did as well is I chose a lining fabric, and I've chosen this beautiful star, which I thought worked very, very well with it. But I didn't press it beforehand because I was being silly. So all I'm going to do now is make sure that I press all of these pieces ready for the lining. Okay, the only other thing you're going to need, so you're going to need 4 outer sections, which I've chosen to be this fabric. You're going to need a bottom section. I've chosen to use this for the bottom. And then you're going to need 5 pieces for your lining. Now you've got to choose as well your binding for the top, because you can see over here we've got a binding as well. So you don't have to use the same fabric. You can find a coordinating fabric that works just as well. This is a gorgeous piece of Juicy Juice fabric, which when I put it on top of that, I thought, oh my goodness, that works brilliantly. So we're going to use this as our binding. And I've got 2 pieces of it because 14 times 4 gives you just over 40, yes, 14 times 4, 52 inches. So you need 52 inches of it. However, when we've cut these off, these are glow-in-the-dark stars. You have got quite a big chunk of fabric over here. So if you wanted to use this as your binding, you'd be cutting 5 strips of that at 2.5 inches. So both would work really well. Otherwise, what you do is you hang on to these, and if you're going to make that quilt in my pattern, these will help add some squares to the quilt in the compendium pattern, and you'll be able to then add that little pop of glow in the dark at the same time. So I've already pressed my binding, and now we're going to press the lining, and we're going to press the Bosal in our form onto the board. Now with this, it is so easy to activate this glue and to make it work. All I would say to you is make sure that you do put, if your glue is sticking out a little bit over here, by that I mean if you have attached your piece of fabric and you've got a tiny little bit of in our form popping out, that is absolutely fine. But when you glue this bit down, just make sure you're using a bit of parchment or Teflon sheeting so that you don't get any gum or glue on the edge of your iron. And literally all you do is you just hold this down for 5 to 10 seconds, depending on how hot your iron is. Try not to use any steam. I'm doing it for about 8 seconds per piece. And you just hold it down, don't move it around because you may just move your fabric ever so slightly, and just keep going all the way along until all the fabric is adhered to your piece of Bosal in our form. Now I've done it up to there, so I'm going to do this. Because I think when most of you are doing this, your ironing board will be a little bit larger than what mine is. I have the world's loudest pigeon cooing away in my garden. It seems to be mating seasons for the pigeons, so they're all trying to have a fun afternoon. She's not alarming at all at 5 o'clock in the morning when they get set off. So you can tell it is so simple. This is now completely fused on. As I feel the corner there, you can see it's completely glued on. If you've done it and sealed it down and then find that a little bit of it's come off or it's not quite adhered as well, just hold your iron back down on it. Don't worry about it. It isn't going to be a problem. There is always going to be, the glue will reactivate as you put the heat onto it. The other great thing about these pods is if you are having a Halloween party or you've got kids coming around to do things, this is really good as well to put all your Halloween sweets in it as well. And if you don't have kids and you just want to do the Halloween sweetie thing for yourself, well, more power to you. What I love as well is it holds an enormous amount of fat quarters. I will say that if you are going to put fabric into it, never forget just how heavy fabric is. And make sure that you always support the bottom of the pod when you take it off its resting place, wherever that may be. You don't want your pod falling apart when it comes out. Okay, so now I've lined this up to the edge of the NR form over here. And quite simply, just like before, I'm holding that down for about 8 seconds to activate. And now I will move this over a little bit so you can actually see a little bit more of it. And my iron cable hopefully will be coming free. We have 5 peacocks that roam around the village. Have you ever seen a peacock fly? Quite scary. So that was from Caroline Clark. Hello, my gorgeous friend. How are you? Caroline, we do retreats at a stately home. And the stately home has a little family of peacocks there. As you can tell, I'm very high tech. My screen is, my zoom and up and down is my hand. Apologies. But yes, the peacocks are terrifying when they fly. They're enormous. You can't realize just how big they are. And they're also quite noisy little creatures, bless their little hearts. It takes a little bit of a while to activate all of these and get it done, but just take your time with it because you want to make sure that everything's all completely lined up. It's all working perfectly. It's all adhered. And now if you want to quilt it as well, all you do is you just do whatever quilting you fancy doing through the NR form. It works perfectly. It's absolutely great. A really great stabilizer for it. And it also helps adhere the glue down and makes sure nothing moves. Almost there, just got this little corner left to go. So that is our that's our 5 sections ready now to do there. You can see I've got a little bubble over here. That is quite normal. If that does happen, I just go like that and then hold this down on the area there, just to kind of smooth the bubbles out, because at the moment you've already glued everything down. So you may end up with some bubbles. Okay. And then as I said, this is my lining fabric. I'm just going to give this a quick, whoops. Give this a quick iron as I go. Just to make sure everything is nice and flat. Because once you start sewing these, you aren't going to be able to iron anything after that. You're going to need 5 of these squares for the lining. If you wanted to do a double-sided fusible in our form, you could definitely do that, and then you would attach this to there. The only thing with doing that is you then end up with the raw edges of your fabric and your in our form sticking out on the inside of your box. For myself, that's how I started making these pods. I didn't enjoy that quite as much as oh, thank you, Caroline. That's very kind of you. Caroline's saying I'm a very good teacher. That's very kind. The good thing with this is by putting the, when you do make the pods, if you are going to have the raw edges of your inner form sticking out and not put a lining, I would suggest that you consider binding it, only because when you, apologies, swimming shorts are all that is needed in this weather. If you are doing the raw edges on the inside of your pods, it's worth just binding it, because there's nothing worse than using the pod for a few months and then you've got this increase of little fabric, because I use them as disposable, as reusable fabric bins, collecting all my cotton threads and stuff, and there's nothing worse than them all getting lodged in your lining and your seams. This is quite a stubborn little stain over there, so I'm just spraying some water on it to get it flat. And a little bit there. And now, I suppose we can leave the iron on simply because we might actually come back and press our lining. It's unlikely. I'm going to turn it off. It's too hot today to have anything hot in our homes. So I'm taking this over here. And I'm going to bring you over to our, oops, our little sewing area over there. Apologies for the rapid movements. And apologies for the messy bits behind there. Hello, Anne Davies, how are you? That feels a little high. Oh, for a YouTube studio. Oh my goodness. Trying to undo these screws, there we go. From the wrong angle, using the wrong hand. Right, so I think I'm going to put you on this side. Or should I give you a sneak peek of my next project? Sneak peek. I'll move that out of the way. You don't want to see that. You don't want to see that. And I'm just going to plug the charger in. Proper low tech, I apologize. Right, so we now are going to do the stitching to make this gorgeous pod. First things first, I apologize for the little stroby bit over here. I'm not quite sure that's there. Oh yes, we do. What have you done with Andrew? Helen, Andrew is sitting behind this wall over there in the cool air, trying to just cool down. Now, one thing we need to just remember with this, many of you have already done this. Apologies for the hand, I'm trying, I'm doing my best. When you do a lining, you can't sew to the very end, because what you're going to have is in a box. When you're sewing a box like this, it's easy when you do the sides, okay? It's 4 seams, so you can end up with a cube. But when you try and sew this bottom in with the 4 cubes, you need to have your 1/4 inch seam over there. So I always start with the lining. And the reason I start with the lining is, if you make a mistake on the lining, it's easier to unpick. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your lining pieces, make sure that they're the same size, those 2 are, and I'm going to sew all the way along down this seam, all the way along here, but I'm stopping a 1/4 inch to the edge over here. And I'll show you, maybe I'll do it first and then show you why. Makes life easier. And I very, very rarely backstitch, but when I make these pods, I do backstitch, only because I think you just get that little bit of security at the top, especially when you come to put it all together. Okay. Right, that's a little more than 1/4 of an inch, but I've stitched almost to the edge. Okay, so it's more than 1/4 of an inch. So all you need to do is do the same gap all the way along, okay? Because when you come to put the square in at the bottom, you need to have the same gap, okay? So all the way from this end, right down to the bottom, except for the 1/4 inch over there, okay? So next I'm taking the next piece in all the way around. So I'm making sure I got those right sides of lining to right sides of lining. And this is the bit where I always get it confused. Make sure you see where you started and where your 1/4 inch is. If you have got a wonder clip or a pin, put it in the area where you are actually going to be stitching towards with a 1/4 inch. And I'm double checking it before I start. That's where my 1/4 inch gap is. So that's the bit where I'm going to have my 1/4 inch. So I start again from the very top. I'm going to do a couple of back stitches. And then we sew all the way down. My stitch length is around about 2.2. You don't want it too big, and you don't want it too small. Okay, so you can see I've left my 1/4 inch down there. And to check that I'm quite close to where I was before on the other ones, those are almost identical. So that's what you're aiming for, is being consistent on those seams. Okay, so now we've got 3 put together. We're looking for our 4th one. So we put our 4th one in. Remember again where you started from, because you're going to be stitching right off the edge of the fabric over there. And you're sewing towards where the 1/4 inch gap is, which we can confirm is over there. Okay. Now, at the moment, I think you can see my fabric has gone a little bit haywire. So what I'm going to do is I'm now going to do a little cheat. So you can see my fabric has slipped a little. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my fabric along. I'm going to end up with a tiny little bit of a pleat over there. It's on the lining. No one's going to care. So if you are worried about it, by all means, unpick away. Whatever works best for you. I am not worried. I'm just simply going to put a tiny little pleat on the top over here, and I am okay with that. You must do what works for you. Because especially when you've got it all together, it's very unlikely anybody is going to see that little gap and that little pleat. But what is important is we've got that same 1/4 inch at the bottom when we come to line everything up. Now you can see there's that tiny little pleat over there, and I bet you now when I fold it back, you can barely tell it. It's a tiny little bit there, but what I have managed to do is make sure that that is exactly the same all the way along. Now at this point, you remember you've only got 4, so you're now sewing them all together to make your giant circle. Just like before, we know that our 1/4 inch is going to be here, and we're stitching off the fabric over there, okay? Right. So we now have the equivalent of a circle. top ends are all sewn together. And now we have that task where we're like, okay, how do I make this into a cube? So this is effectively, in my opinion, the easy bit. It just takes a little bit of time to wrap your head around. So you're going to have right side of the bottom of your lining to the right side of your fabric. And you're going to pick a side. There is no right or wrong, any side. You've got to sew all 4 of them. So at the moment, this is where you've left your 1/4 inch over there. So you're going to line up, you're going to pull this little bit out the way. So that bit there, you're going to pull out the way. I think you can see that. You're going to pull this bit down and out the way. And you're going to line that bit up that we're attaching, this big bit here. We're lining that up to the square over here. And we're going to start stitching where this thread stopped. So that's your starting point. And you're going to stitch all the way along to where that is over there. But when you line these all up, you can see your fabrics meet all the way along. And when you get down to this end, you're just moving this little bit out of your way. So if you can imagine that that fabric wasn't there, you're literally just sewing down that seam. So maybe when I've sewn this will make a bit more sense to you. And if you're not getting it, that is fine. I didn't get it to start with either. I did only understand it when I actually started making one. But you are doing what is known as a Y seam. And I used to call them a Y for yucky. But once I wrapped my head around how I'm doing them, I was really pleased because they are really good. And when you figure out what you're doing, it does make your life a lot easier. So you can tell I have just missed that section over there. Okay, you're meant to have started on the end there, but that's okay. But look, I nailed it over there. So we've now attached one of the insides of our square. So next, what we're going to do is exactly the same as what we've done before. On this side, we're going to take the central section of the square, the bottom of the lining, and I'm going to line this up to the edge of where we're sewing to. Again, folding this little bit down so that that's where you're going to stitch to. And you're going to sew all the way along here. The advantage is you know you're going to be starting on that black line and ending on that black line again. Folding out the way the pieces that you aren't on that side. You'll see that I'm hand cranking the side of my machine, and that has hit perfectly. Perfect. Okay, and then I'm just lining everything up to where I'm going to. That was perfect. So you can see I've stitched directly into that dot over there. That's what you're looking for. And over here, exactly the same. Okay, so we've now sewn 2 of the sides on, and we're going to do exactly the same on the last 2 sides. The 3rd side is the same as what we've done before. The 4th side is ever so slightly easier, and I'll show you why. But this is the 4th side, so you're lining everything up, folding this little bit down, folding this little bit down, and we're now sewing all the way down this side over here. And the reason I start with the lining is the method you're going to use to put the box together is exactly what we've done with the lining, and I just find it a lot easier to use the lining to start with. And you can see that that was a little bit off. Don't worry if you don't meet the points exactly, but there I did, okay? It doesn't matter. So all you do here, now it doesn't really matter what you do, you can just sew off the edge and off the edge, because you don't need to manipulate any fabric to do another corner. So all I'm doing next is sewing right off one edge and right off the other. Sorry, it's very warm. And we now have a finished lining. And if you put you can see on the edges there, those are all caught. Everything is fine. I'm putting my finger in there to see if there is a hole or for any reason, but there isn't. So now we just leave this exactly as it is for now, because we're going to come back to that in a minute. Now we're going to do exactly the same thing by putting our 4 pieces together, okay? Now they have got images on them, so I just need to make the decision of if I'm going to try and line them all up, and if I am, how am I going to do that? And they don't line up, so it doesn't really matter. So what I'm going to do is, right, I'm going to sew these 2 together. I'm not too fussed about this, so exactly the same thing. I'm sewing off this edge, and I'm going to leave a 1/4 inch gap over here. So it's exactly how we did our lining. I make sure my tops are lined up because we can always fiddle the bottom. Now this one, I do lengthen my stitch length a tiny bit because you're going through a huge amount of fabric and insulation, and I do stabilizer, but I do also definitely do a back stitch at the beginning here, okay? So I line these all up, okay? Get that a good old tug, and then I let the sewing machine do the work for me, and I take it really slow all the way through, okay? Making sure I've kept my 1/4 inch seam all the way along. And as you get towards the bottom, don't forget you've got to leave your 1/4 inch seam at the bottom. And this one I definitely back stitch because there's a lot of pressure and support on the bottom over there. So you can see I've left a 1/4 inch over there, gone all the way off over there. Now if it doesn't line up perfectly, don't worry about it. Okay? Now what I've also got is I've got my witches going in opposite directions. You can see that one's going this way, that one's going that way, and I've done the same over there. So I now attach that one over here. I know that I've got to leave my 1/4 inch gap over here, so I'm sewing off the paper, off the stabilizer over here. If you wish to use wonder clips at this point to hold everything together, please do so. I've done so many of these, I'm very used to it. So for me, not using wonder clips and just free-handing it is simple and easy, but you may prefer to use wonder clips. It does help keep everything all lined up. Now we're getting towards the end. Remind yourself about that 1/4 inch gap. One more, and then we're going back. And we are done. Exactly the same as before. We've got a 1/4 inch gap over there, so we're able to move everything around, and we've gone off all the way over there. So now we've done number 1. This is number 1, number 2, and number 3, and then we've got number 4 to go on here as well. Now, if I've cut this correctly, I might manage to line the houses up all the way along. I am not going to lose any sleep over it if I can't. It will be lovely if it can. If it doesn't, that is okay. We're going to be kinder to ourselves. Right. Now we are ready to stitch this down. We're going on the bit that we're starting off the sheet with, so we double back stitch that. Now when I line these up, you'll see over here you've got fabric lines to line up, so I'm lining that one up there, but equally I've got a fabric line I want to line up over there, so I'm going to do this in stages. There's no guarantee this is going to work. You only try. It's only fabric. And if it is perfect, you'd probably offend the gods anyway. Okay. Did we meet it? Oh my goodness, we did. A little bit off at the top, but I'm okay with that. That looks lovely. Oh, I'm very pleased with that. And now what we do is we are now sewing these two together over here. Okay, exactly like we did in the last time with the lining. 4 of them together. And we now get that down all the way here. And now we've got our pod all together. Now, the only difference is you've got to turn this the right way. Oh, no, you don't. I'm sorry, never mind. Ignore me. Ignore me. So now we know that this is going in next. So just like what we did with the lining, we're going to take this and we're going to line it up right sides together. And we're going to sew. Oh. We're going to sew all the way along. You've got to do all 4 sides. So it doesn't really matter which one you do first. You've got to do all 4 sides anyway. So just like before, you're going to line those up all the way along there. Fold this little corner bit down and that little corner bit down, and you're going to sew a 1/4 inch in all the way along there to a 1/4 inch in. Now you've got to just take it slow and see what works best for you with manipulating. It is quite a lot of fabric to be moving around, so just take it slow. There is no rush. And at this point, I would say to you that the Wonder Clips would be a really good idea. Of course, I wasn't that organized, but this will give you a good start on how to do it. Okay. I'm going to do a back stitch on this as well. Make sure my needle is down, and there we go. Once you've got those first few stitches in, it's a lot easier to hold into place. I've lined this up perfectly over here. I know I've got to leave a 1/4 inch over here. Annoyingly, my fabric over here has slipped, so I need to go and get an unpicker. Oh, that's so annoying. I can't find my unpicker.
Check the kitchen for you.
And it's really tiny to me.
I don't have any other for you.
Always the way when you need something and you don't have it. Annoying. Sorry about that. So, okay. Do not recommend this. I'm only doing this because I don't have an unpicker to hand. Do not do this. Okay. Right, that's done. Use Wonder Clips. So all I've done there is just tear the seam open, and I'm moving this down now to start that seam again. That is a good reminder just to say, take your time, make sure you're holding everything securely. If you're not using Wonder Clips, hold everything together, because it's such a big block of fabric that you're using. It is very easy for it to stretch and move and manipulate. That's a lot better. And just as you're getting towards the edge over here, move that little seam out the way there to make sure that that then will go in perfectly to catch. Ah, nailed it. Okay. So you can see I've caught that exactly where it needs to be over there. So now we're going to do exactly the same thing on the side. What you doing? Andrew's creeping into the kitchen to go and get a drink. He can't be seen on the camera. So just like before, you then just manipulate everything into position. Drop your needle into position and then get everything lined up. Back a few steps. Okay, I've got my needle down and then I'm lining this all up perfectly. Okay. Perfect. Okay, as we get to that point, just realign everything. Almost perfect. I was one tiny stitch out over there. But that's what we're looking for. Just keep going around and you'll have your box all ready to go. I think by now you know how you're doing this. Make sure when you get to your corners you do some back stitching just to make sure everything is secure and in place. Line everything all up. And if you are making yourself some bigger boxes, just know that the risks are obviously there's a lot more fabric to maneuver, but they are a really quick make and you do have an incredibly effective item when you're finished. So just like when we did the lining, for the false seam, you can just go straight over. You don't need to worry about the Y seam at this point because everything else is all joined up. So we're going to go over the edge. Okay. So now you've got a box. I don't know if that zooms out. I'll move you back. So now you've officially got a box. So now what you do is you turn it the right way around, okay? Oh my goodness, this looks amazing. Sorry, I get very excited with this. I'm gonna stand up just because it's so huge. And what you do is you use your finger and push out these corner bits. Push these little corner bits out all the way. You can see you can then push those out. And a box. And you can see I was really lucky with some of the linings up to the fabrics. So you're at this point, you can just smooth these out with your fingers. Look, that one is perfect. I'm really happy with that. And then all you do next is you take your lining and you drop your lining in. Okay, I have not pressed any of these. If you wish to press them, by all means, you go and press away. Now what you do is you would now take your wonder clips and you would put these, what you're looking to do is when you line these up, the seam of your lining joins on with the seam of your bondaway, of your in-arm form. And you then just going with an eighth of an inch all the way around, you're going to now tack this into place before you do your binding. That's what I do. You are welcome to try and merge it in with your binding at the same time. You're a better sewer than I am. And please, by all means, use your wonder clips for this. You do not need to do this freestyle like I'm going to. As you can tell, I'm incredibly disorganized today, but I've done a few stitches. I'm opening up my seam over here for my inner form and for my lining. Line those up there. I've got an 1/8 of an inch stitch line. And as I get to a point where they meet, I'm leaving my needle down and I'm rotating my pod towards me. I don't think we can call this one a pod. It's a bit more like a spaceship, really. Again, I'm opening up my seam over here with my lining, in theory. Come on. And I'm opening up the seam over here where we were for the inner form, hanging my, holding on to those, lining the fabric up all the way along, and an 1/8 of an inch all the way down. Now at this point, if it doesn't quite line up and you have got a couple of little pleats, it's in the binding, so it doesn't really matter. So you'll see over here, I've got a tiny little bit of excess. So I'm not leaving that on the seam edge. I'm just putting that into a little pleat over there, knowing that it's there. You are more than welcome to ease your pleat in as you go around, but you must do what works best for you. Okay, plop. It's a big old kit, this one. So just like before, pressing my seams open, if I can get them open, and open, and an 1/8 of an inch all the way along. And last but not least, obviously now those are all lined up, you just hold that apart. And your lining is done. So your lining is fully installed. I'm going to just be very unprofessional and do that again. Come on, you can get this right. So you've got your pod all completely made. You've got a full lining in your pod. And it's great if you've got a guest bedroom that you want to do something and you want to put a little laundry basket in. These are really, really sturdy. All you've got left to do now is the binding around the outside. I stitch my binding on the front over here, stitch it on here, fold it back, and then I do a top stitch around here to catch it at the back. If you want to hand sew it, by all means. I'm not covering the binding today, simply because we've been doing 49 minutes already, and I feel that we've done long enough. But that is my little Halloween pod. And I think that should be enough for my chocolates and sweeties for my Halloween project. What do you think? Let me know. If you are looking to get the pattern, the Halloween compendium, you get a sweetie bag as well as the pod, as well as a quilt. It's currently on sale on my website at $3.99. That is at August 2022. Do check it out. It might be a bit higher now because it's not on sale. Thank you very much for being able to support me. Thank you very much for joining me for my pod. And if you want to even make a little eccentric hat, I suppose. But yeah, I love these. And if you get them 13 inches square, they plop perfectly into your little Calyx bookcases from IKEA. Look after you, stay safe.